It started as just another Thursday morning. A quiet street, a police stop, a teenager, a chase. But what unfolded in the next 48 hours would shake a city, take 2 lives, ignite a legal firestorm, and leave the nation asking, what really happened? This is not just a story of crime and punishment. It's a story about grief, about rage, about loss, about the systems we live in, and how they sometimes break us before we even understand what's happening. May 1st, 2025. The Cincinnati Police Department receives a report of a stolen vehicle. Nothing unusual there. Officers begin pursuit when they spot the car. Inside is an 18-year-old named Rodney Hinton. At some point, Ryan flees the vehicle. According to police, he runs through a neighborhood, and during the chase, he allegedly pulls out a firearm. Officers shout, "He's got a gun!" Moments later, gunfire. Ryan is hit and killed. The weapon recovered at the scene? A handgun. But that weapon had not been fired. Legally, pointing a weapon, even if you don't fire it, can still justify use of force, but only if that actually happened. What happened in those split seconds between chase and shooting is the center of this firestorm, because by the time the sun set that evening, the name Rodney Hinton was echoing across social media. Ryan wasn't some hardened criminal. He was a high school senior, a fan of hip-hop, a brother, a son. Friends described him as funny, protective, a little impulsive but full of life. Family say he made mistakes, but never deserved to die for them. He had just turned 18. He wasn't supposed to be in that car. And yet, now, he was gone. The next morning, May the 2nd, Rodney Hinton Jr. walks into a Cincinnati police station. He's not a criminal. He's a grieving father. He's here for one reason, to watch the body cam footage that shows how his son died. Family lawyers say he broke down almost immediately. He couldn't finish watching. He stood up, shook his head, walked out, and disappeared. That same day, graduation ceremonies were underway at the University of Cincinnati. A sheriff's deputy was directing traffic near the festivities, a routine job. But at 4:45 p.m., something horrific happened. A black vehicle accelerated toward the deputy. Witnesses say it looked deliberate. The deputy was struck and killed on the spot. The driver? Rodney Hinton Jr. Rodney was taken into custody immediately. He did not resist. Police say he said almost nothing. Within hours, Rodney was charged with aggravated murder, a charge that, in Ohio, can carry life imprisonment or even the death penalty. In court, he appeared gaunt, quiet. The courtroom was packed with law enforcement officers, dozens of them. A show of strength. A message. One of their own had been taken, and they would not rest until someone paid for it. His bond was denied. His next hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. But the questions? They were only just beginning. The prosecutors say this was murder, that Rodney was overcome with rage and grief and chose revenge, but his defense team tells a different story. They say he was traumatized, mentally unstable, barely functioning after watching his son's final moments. That what happened wasn't premeditated, it was the product of a broken man acting in despair. Some legal experts argue this could be grounds for diminished responsibility or even temporary insanity. But the bar for that defense is incredibly high. Zoom out. What do you see? A teenager, dead in a police shooting. A father accused of murdering a deputy. But underneath that, this is also a story about 2 systems colliding. One system, the justice system, is rigid, reactive, and fast to punish. The other system, the social system, is about grief, trauma, mental health, and it moves far, more slowly. Let's not forget, 2 families are grieving. The family of the deputy, mourning a public servant killed in the line of duty. The Hinton family, mourning not one loss, but two. 2 funerals. 2 vigils. 2 names carved into gravestones too early. This case is about more than what happened. It's about why it happened. Could Ryan's death have been prevented? Could Rodney have been helped before that final fatal moment? Could we have made space for grief instead of letting it turn into destruction? And how do we, as a society, process trauma without turning it into tragedy? There are no heroes here. No easy villains, just a father and a son both gone, a deputy gone, a city shaken, and a country watching, wondering how many more lives we'll lose before we start listening to the pain. Rodney Hinton Jr. will stand trial. Investigations into Ryan's shooting are still ongoing, but no outcome, no sentence, no verdict can undo what's already happened. What we often fail to consider in these cases is the psychological aftermath of police-involved shootings, not just for those who die, but for the families who live. For many parents, seeing their child's final moments, especially in violent state-sanctioned circumstances, causes a level of trauma that doesn't follow normal patterns of grief. It becomes rage, helplessness, detachment. In Rodney's case, we're forced to ask, was he reacting to his son's death, or to the decades of systemic trauma he and his community have endured? When people talk about generational trauma in Black communities, this is what they mean. It's not just about what happened in one moment. It's about how many moments like it have stacked up in someone's life until the weight becomes unbearable. The legal system thrives on categories: guilty or not guilty, intentional or accidental, premeditated or impulsive. But human behavior, especially in moments of trauma, rarely fits those neat definitions. If Rodney Hinton deliberately hit that deputy, that's one legal story. But if he was in a psychological free fall, if he wasn't even aware of his own actions in that moment, then the justice system faces a much more complicated truth. And here's the catch. The law doesn't always know what to do with complicated truths. That's why cases like this test the limits of our criminal justice system, because it wasn't built to process pain. It was built to punish it. Whatever happens next, whether Rodney is convicted or whether his defense is able to argue diminished capacity, the results of this case will send a message far beyond Cincinnati. If the system throws away a grieving father without examining the full picture, it reinforces the idea that Black pain is disposable. But if the system pauses to consider his mental state, the trauma, the context, it might not excuse his actions, but it could at least begin to acknowledge the conditions that caused them. And that acknowledgement, as small as it sounds, is revolutionary, because accountability without compassion is just retribution. And if we want a future with fewer Ryans, fewer Rodneys, and fewer grieving communities, we'll need a justice system and a society that sees the full story.